Well, the Oscar Pistorius murder trial took a turn this week with the forensic psychiatrist, Meryl Foster, who declared that Pistorius has a mental illness. Now, it's taken very seriously, and it's a diagnosis that could see Pistorius found not guilty by reason of mental illness or intellectual disability. Now, here's a snippet from Foster's testimony yesterday.
Mr. Pistorius has a long history of generalized anxiety disorder that appears to have been increasing with time. It is likely to have commenced at the age of 11 months when he was hospitalized and underwent bilateral below-knee amputations at a time when he had no language and he could not have understood what was happening to him. His physical vulnerability makes him more anxious. His anxiety makes him want to conceal his physical vulnerability.
Now, with the athlete now facing a possible stint in a psychiatric hospital to establish if he does indeed have what has been described as generalized anxiety disorder, with us in studio to give us an understanding of this condition is clinical psychologist Abraham Leroux. Abraham, thank you very much for coming in this morning and taking the time to talk to us. So, obviously, this is a very big twist in the story that is this trial. So, when we talk about generalized anxiety disorder, what are the symptoms and how common is this disorder in South Africa?
First, to understand is anxiety is a warning system, so it warns us against impending threat.
Yes.
So it also gives us then time to react to that threat. And also what we need to differentiate what is fear and what is anxiety. Fear is, for example, when we know the threat,
yes,
and it's an external, it's like a lion, so we know what we are afraid of. Anxiety is an internal, unknown threat, so we're anxious but we don't know why. So in order to make that diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, the symptoms needs to be very excessive. And it has to be there every day for most of the day for at least 6 months.
Wow.
And symptoms would include like irritability, difficulty to concentrate, difficulty to sleep, fatigue, then also restlessness and also muscle tension. But these, as I said, these symptoms must be very excessive in order to make that diagnosis. About roughly 3 to 8% of the population has it, so it's actually quite common.
Yeah.
And the other thing is twice as much women has it, and about 45% of these people has it since childhood.
Yeah. So when we look at this and the disorder itself, how does it affect one's response in terms of, let's say, like you described now, an impending danger, your fight or flight response when you have this generalized anxiety disorder? How does it affect it?
Obviously, it increased anxiety tremendously. So your flight and flight response would be exaggerated like tremendously because of the anxiety. So what would happen, say, for example, if Oscar actually has this disorder, then his fight and flight response would be far more than your average person.
Yeah.
And if he thought that there was an intruder in the house, then obviously the anxiety would go up tremendously. He would like to defend himself. Most people with this disorder would rather take flight. But if you're trapped, like for example, he has his blades on, then he would actually attack in order to protect himself. If, for example, he thought that Reva was in the bathroom, but he feared that she was leaving him, and he would try to actually stop her, and that could also then potentially lead to an attack because of the same kind of anxiety disorder.
Yeah. Now, the psychiatrist also went on to say that people with generalized anxiety disorder are not dangerous as such, so I'll ask you about that, but probably shouldn't own firearms. Would you agree with that? And if so, how does one go about? Can you test whether somebody has that kind of disorder?
Well, that would be a very difficult question to answer because most people with mental disorders would probably be more volatile and emotionally unstable around, and that would mean that they're potentially more dangerous with firearms. But that's such a grey area that it would actually be impossible to test.
Yeah.
For example, disabilities like mental disability or psychosis obviously would be excluded.
Yeah. When we're talking about his disorder and the possibility that it could actually be a genuine diagnosis, can one pull it back to events in the past, i.e. where the psychiatrist cited that the fact that the amputation of Oscar Pistorius' legs was obviously not a normal occurrence to a child's life, so that could have been a mental assault on him in that way. Could you put it back to those events and then thus say it is an accurate diagnosis?
Most definitely, because if you look at an 11-month-old baby, you can't prepare it for such a dramatic kind of impact on his life.
Yeah.
So he would feel very threatened by the environment, like he felt abandoned by his parents. There would be a very kind of strange environment and scary environment of the hospital, then the severe pain, not feeling protected by the people that he loved, that would be seen as an assault.
Yeah.
And because of the drama of that kind of experience, that would be seen as highly traumatic.
Yeah. Abraham, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Clinical psychologist Abraham Leroux there giving us his insights on, of course, what we're talking about, the Oscar Pistorius murder trial, and, of course, the twist that it took in terms of Oscar being diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. Now, tell us if you have been diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. Let us know on our Facebook page and talk to us about it. Of course, Expresso Morning Show, SABC3. As well, you can follow www.sabcnews.com for more details on the trial.